Breaking news. The government has this outbreak under control. We repeat, the government has this outbreak under control. No need to pay attention to this outbreak anymore. It's over, ladies and gentlemen. Let's think about moving on. Let's think about going shopping. Let's think about how things used to be. We want to go out there, ladies and gentlemen. We want to go back to our civilized society. Everything is awesome. Everything is fine. Don't ask questions, ladies and gentlemen. What are we looking at here? Well, as you can see, everything is under control. They're stacking up the corpses about 4 pine boxes high, 3 or 4. And as you can see, they're doing an excellent job of covering that up. So by the time they're done with that little row, you'll never know they were even there. It's very nice, very sweet. You have to wonder how many, people are in each one of these trenches. I mean, you could do the math. You could be here all day counting these boxes. Where is this, ladies and gentlemen? Would you be surprised to know that this is in America? This is the United States of America. You might think this is someplace else, but it's a secret place, a secret island right outside of New York City. It's called Hart Island. And people have been watching this place for years because they've been burying people out there, whether it be prisoners or homeless people. It's a very secret island. Nobody's allowed to film there, and the only way to get there is on a chartered boat by the Department of Corrections. It's very weird. It's like Plum Island. It's like, what's really going on in New York City? What's going on with this virus, ladies and gentlemen? We'll be getting into the latest news. What's going on? We've got some footage here of this field hospital in New York. And this looks like it's completely run by the Department of Defense, National Guard, or something else. And they say that there's people there now, but we've got this nice, high quality, movie theater-like presentation of what's going on. Notice the protective gear here. I mean, this is almost as bad as being out there naked. And it's not far from wearing a garbage bag and a tampon on your face. But that's okay. We're the richest, most powerful country in the world. We've got this under control. I mean, so much so, in fact, that when people drive by the hospital, there's nobody there. Where do these people go? There's a lot of unanswered questions. And right now, as you can tell, as the numbers go up, the dead bodies, the unemployment, so does the stock market. It's very weird. Everything is under control. We've never seen times like these, but it's so messed up that, nobody really cares. There is no amount of crazy that could shock the people of our country anymore. We've seen it all. And now people are really genuinely losing interest, and they just want to get back to life. What is going on out there with this virus, with this Wuhan supervirus, this bioweapon that is killing millions of people, well, not officially. We don't know how many people have been killed by this virus. There's 21 million cell phone subscribers missing in China right now, according to the phone records. Just vanished, gone. Makes you wonder how many people have been killed. We're going to get into some startling admissions from the White House task force, where they're like, well, yeah, there's a lot of people that got written off as heart attacks, but now we're changing that. And you just never know. I mean, they've got a lot of numbers to play with. They got a lot of deaths that happen all the time that they can just kind of use, like flu. I mean, for a lot of this, I mean, this guy's demonic too. Check out that dude. But, you know, for a lot of this epidemic, they were just pretending like it wasn't there. And, you know, a lot of the pneumonia deaths could have been Wuhan instead of the flu. We'll never know. We'll never know. And you have to wonder if they haven't been spiking the flu, you know, the regular flu season. You have to wonder if they haven't been practicing like these little mini Wuhans in America already by releasing hyper-virulent strains of flu. How would you know? We know that in 2017, 2018, that winter, nearly 80,000 people died of the flu, where the normal flu season is like 20, 30,000 people. So how do you know they haven't been doing this like secretly? There's a lot of information out there that suggests this was pre-planned. The Project ZYPHR video from last summer was very interesting indeed, talking about top secret documents floating around referencing a pandemic flu that kills millions of people. Will it kill millions of people? Right now, you know, we're starting to get that false sense of security again. We're starting to feel like, oh, we're winning. You know, we're fighting back. We've got the chloroquine and it's all looking good. Right? But what we know about this virus from the very get-go is that everything that's thrown at it doesn't work. The tests don't work. The masks don't work. What makes you think hydroxychloroquine is really going to work? There's going to be a little surprise. A surprise, bitches. And we're going to get into that because there's a very powerful research paper out there right now talking about the reason for the failure of antibody tests. 1 in 3 people that are infected with this virus hardly have any antibodies for this virus at all. And the ones that do, the older people, that leads into cytokine storms. And so, you know, we're starting to see, you know, what drives the cytokine storms. And it has to do with, like, you know, inflammation and the amount of antibodies that are being produced to fight the virus. And it causes this perfect storm where the immune system attacks itself, your own body. So bring down inflammation and the like to avoid the cytokine storms. That's what they're, you know, finding with these novel drugs like the Zithromax. For some reason, it brings down the inflammation. And we know that this virus, this disease, thrives on the inflammation. But we're learning that, in fact, more than likely, this is indeed airborne AIDS, ladies and gentlemen. And we suspect that it's attacking the B cells, the helper cells in the immune system that are responsible for the antibodies. And this would allow it to go latent, like the Epstein-Barr virus, the mono virus, the herpes virus. And we're going to have to see if that pans out. That's speculation right now, but it would make sense that it's attacking the B cells. And in any case, it looks like immunity to this virus is not yet established. And until they can absolutely prove that, that should really be the working situation. Anyways, you're looking at this mass gravesite at Hart Island. And there's a project out there that has been tracking, the mysterious burials at this place just outside of New York City. What is it with these New York islands? What is it with New York, New Babylon? What is it with this beast system with Sodom and Gomorrah? You've seen the Luciferian product placement on television. They're grooming your kids out there. Oh, what happened to the video guy? But it's non-stop, evil on the TV. It's the devil's television, DVD. You know what I mean? And these people are just bad news all the way around. Let's get into some news and then we'll come back to what we're up against. Ephesians 6:12, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this is a testing site. What city is this, please? Martinez, California. In Martinez, California, there's just nobody there. Where, oh, where did the people go? Where, oh, where did they go? So either everybody's too scared, or they're just, slowly dying at home, or, everything's awesome. Which one is it, ladies and gentlemen? What do you guys think out there? We're broadcasting live on the ScrewTube. What do you guys think out there? Is it a hoax? No lines at 5 major Oklahoma City hospitals, but there was a line at Starbucks, according to LG Hamilton. Now, we know that their tests don't work. We've got endless testimonials of that. There's a problem with the tests. They're not testing people. And you just have to wonder, they say they've tested 2+ million people. Where's the footage of that? Where did that actually happen? Most of these testing sites are limited to 250 tests per day, and they're not testing anybody. There's nobody at the hospitals. Where are these people being tested at? Is the question. This hospital at Central Park in New York City is empty. 3 hospitals were surveyed. Their biggest complaints were a severe shortage of testing supplies. So, you would assume that people are being tested in hospitals, but that is not the case. They're not being tested at these drive-ins for the most part. Where did they test these 2 million people? Testing is still the big issue around the country. And, we've got all of these clips from, or on our Twitter here. We could probably play a couple of these. We've played these before.
Also, states can do their own testing. States are supposed to be doing testing.
I know you don't want to talk about the Inspector General report, but testing is still a big issue in this country. When can hospitals...
It still looks like it is a big issue. They don't want to talk about it. We know there's a problem with the testing. And it's kind of like the death towers. There's a problem with the death towers. They don't want to talk about it. They just want to say how wonderful it is. And, they've made it a national security priority. They're going to roll it out on everybody's street corner. So think about that when you think about this administration. Think about, who genocided the Kurds. I mean, they might not be, sweethearts or anything like that, but we got a history of genocide here, ladies and gentlemen. Foreign and domestic. Death towers in America, and they certainly slaughtered the Kurds out there in Syria. High-power university labs that are approved to test for COVID are getting turned away by hospitals. Thousands of coronavirus tests are going unused. Why is that, ladies and gentlemen? Why, oh why, is that happening? You never know, but we're broadcasting live. If you can't take Zithromax, you can substitute it with tetracycline, according to the New York Post. Anti-inflammatory effects. Reduce your inflammation, reduce your cytokines, reduce your risks. Now, in the video description, we've listed quite a few plants and herbs that are anti-inflammatories. Everybody's heard of TUMERIC, but there's a bunch of other ones, and this is what really drives the cystic fibrosis-like symptoms in COVID patients. Not sure if anybody knows what cystic fibrosis is, but essentially the lungs persistently fill up with fluids. It's like persistent inflammation of the lungs, and people choke out horribly. And so bringing down the inflammation is key to managing this disease, and managing it you will, ladies and gentlemen, one day or another. Now this guy, a doctor, let's listen to a couple words here.
See patients
Maybe
with COVID-19 symptoms, and I still can't test the majority of patients that come in unless they're sick enough to get admitted or have a certain narrow group of features.
So we're seeing, similar stories across the board. Does it really matter now? I mean, everybody's pretty much infected for the most part, especially in the big cities. Maybe not in your area. It's really hard to say. But chances are, if you're 100 miles from a big city, your area has been hit. And, countless people, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea of testing right now truly is a little irrelevant. The question is, can they process the people that need, assistance? And usually it begins by testing. But that process is so messed up that it's just not happening. And so no test, no treatment, bottlenecks, people falling through the cracks, and et cetera, et cetera. There's unrest out there in South Africa. We're, starting to pay attention to the African strains. And I'm not sure if we're going to have any time for next strain today, but looking at the phylogenetic tree, you just have to wonder about a lot of things. We think we've picked up a few anomalies, but we want to try and sort out the mess the best we can. In any case, things are breaking down a little bit everywhere. Numbers that, were going down, a couple days ago are now going back up. And, they're going to want to prolong this martial law, state of emergency as long as they can, obviously. Here in the UK, they're like, you can't even go out in your front yard.
When you look around and there's no to stay indoors because of COVID-19.
So you're going to have to, check that out on our Twitter feed. But in any case, the cop, sees somebody on their front yard, and they're like, you have to go back indoors. Quite literally, you can't even go out in your front yard and get a little fresh air or sunshine. You have to be indoors breathing in the irritants. And, you have to remember that volatile organic compounds and detergents and disinfectants will irritate the lungs. Bleach, chlorine, you name it. Perfume, anything with a fragrance or an odor that's unnatural and synthetic. These will irritate your lungs and accelerate the disease. And of course, the New World Order is running little ads, little news stories about how to, spring clean and freshen up your place and protect yourself from COVID, et cetera, et cetera. And they want you breathing in the fumes. And in the UK, they're always like 2 steps, ahead when it comes to, everything Orwellian. And, here they're literally, telling people you can't go in your front yard. Yet, if you look at videos from the U.S., people are just roaming around the suburbs. It's like a big block party, and people are all walking their dogs and, like counting the teddy bears in the windows. You know what I mean? And so it's like two different worlds. But they would like to get you there. You had the, World Health Organization, if you will, come on television and say, we need to go door to door and take the infected people in your home away for your safety. So they're already trying to, set the stage for the goon squads. Everything that, we were talking about in the Wuhan videos, the early stages of this outbreak, is trying to manifest itself. They're trying to sell it to you. Like it's a wonderful idea, like a brave new world. And, watch out for it. Push back against it. I think it's absolutely time for a whole bunch of civil disobedience. These people have done nothing but make the situation worse since the beginning. And they haven't done anything really to make it better. And, now, they want to come on television like they have some sort of credibility. And, just mandate all sorts of things. And I don't think they're rendering a public service. I think they're taking advantage of the situation, and, trying to declare themselves kings and queens and dictators and imperial masters and wartime presidents. They've suspended the Constitution. It's a very irregular situation. And you can bet that they're going to cling on to this for as long as they can. Because once, this passes, people are going to start asking the right questions. They're already starting to ask the right questions like, what happened here exactly? How come we didn't have any supplies? How come, nothing was done? Especially since we know that they were getting, all sorts of briefings from the intelligence community all the way back since November of last year. We're now figuring out that in November of last year, it was a full-blown epidemic in Wuhan already. And it was, sounding all sorts of alarms in the intelligence community. And so, there really wasn't any excuse for them, to be caught off guard, not prepared, not have tests, not have masks, not have hospitals. You have to wonder, what really happened then. Because if any of this is true in the sense that, in the sense of these videos from China, these could all be crisis actors, right? But if any of these videos are true, and people were just dropping dead and they were burying people alive, and, there's 20 million people missing from their, phone records. If it's that deadly, if it's that severe, where are all the dead bodies in America? Where are all the dead bodies in all of the other countries? How long has this thing actually been circulating is the question. And, what we're starting to piece together is really interesting. And I think we found something that's really kind of like mind-blowing, to say the least. I almost want to share it, but it's going to take probably a minute or two to prep that. We didn't actually get that ready to go. How's everybody doing out there? Anybody out there? Oh, looks like there's a few people out there. No kidding. How you doing? But remember this, they always tell you the same thing when it comes to their eugenics programs. Oh, it's, everything's fine. Everything's awesome. Don't worry about it, And what do you find out? You find out, oh shit, it's the worst case scenario. Each and every time it's like that, whether it be the fluoride, the pesticides, the vaccines, the 5G, the chemtrails, you name it. It's exactly what you think it is. But they're like, oh no, it's no big deal. It's just the flu. And I'll tell you what, you got to hand it to Trump. He was like the other day at the press conference, he's like, see, it is just like the flu, he says now too. He's like, he's not backing away from that statement. He's like, it's just like the Spanish flu. Oh, what, you didn't understand? Oh, you thought it was just the regular flu. No, I meant the Spanish flu, bitches. That's what I let in. The Spanish fucking flu. I mean, he's a comedian. Be sure to check out Derek Prince, excellent preacher. Military warns of coronavirus breakouts on board another aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz. And, all the sailors in there are packed in like sardines. It's going to be another Diamond Princess on steroids. But yeah, I want to tell you, I want to load this up, and we're going to try and distract you and keep you busy on a different screen here. Look at the mass graves while we load this up on the Next Strain website. But, again, if you watched yesterday's broadcast, we profiled the news reports on the intelligence memos to the White House, National Security Council, on how bad the situation was in Wuhan last November. And we found something yesterday that was really peculiar. And I'm going to try and bring up the screen share here of this. And I hope that you can make this out. Probably not. But there's entries, early on for in the gene bank that shows up on Next Strain. And I'm not sure if that really means anything to anybody. But basically, every sample they get from a patient, if they sequence it, they can submit it to what's referred to the gene bank, and then it's available for other scientists, and it has a number, it has a label. But if you look at the ones in France, which is early January, at the time of the lockdown in Wuhan, January 24th, you look at it and at this stage, I think they had probably like 1 or 2 cases. They had maybe like, 10 cases confirmed. But if you look at the name of this one, it says IDF 0372 2020. That actually means something. If you look at this USA entry, it's USA/CA/1 2020. Obviously you can decode what that means. California, the first case in the year 2020. In this entry here, IDF stands for Ile-de-France, which is kind of like the, it's Paris area. And the number is case number 373. So already on January 24th, it looks like they already had 373 cases that they had, gene banked, versus the 10 that they had admitted to on television. And I'm not sure if anybody's going to really pick up on that, but it tells us that these things were circulating for a lot longer than we think it was. Like the first California case was way advanced in terms of its mutations clock. It was twice as old as pretty much everything else. And this was picked up at, January 24th, which means that this was, closer to the original strain. And I'll tell you what, we've been looking at this in a couple other different ways. And it almost looks like they're releasing this from a vial. We may just have to load this live. It's kind of ghetto, but at this stage, what difference does it make? But if you look at this so this is like, all of the mutations of COVID-19 right now, and all of these little plots are an entry in the gene bank. And it's kind of tough to make heads or tails of this, but you can kind of clock this, and it gives you a real interesting graph. You've got date on one axis and then mutations on the other. And essentially what you see is that over time, you get more mutations. That kind of makes sense. And there's like an average to it. And this is the clock that they kind of use to, for a lot of different things. to figure out where it's been, where it came from, at what time it diverged. But what we're seeing here is that on the x-axis, we're basically seeing new entries with like no mutations. It's like all of these came right out of the vial. And we're seeing like in England, we got like a fresh one. You know, February 7th, a new release from the vial. I mean, this, you know, it looks like it just came directly from the source. Shanghai, a new release. Hong Kong, new release. Hong Kong, new release. USA, Illinois, looks like a new release. Singapore, you know, and this was, look, the Chicago one was March 1st. It had like pretty much the exact same genetic sequence as like the very first samples ever taken way back in, you know, early December. Like virtually no divergence at all, a carbon copy. And so, you know, look, I mean, to me, I mean, these look like anomalies. There's a lot of other anomalies too, like these ones that are super highly mutated, but you know, it looks like, you know, there's a lot of things going on in Africa, Senegal, and Congo right now. We'll be following those, but we'll get back into the news. And you can check all this stuff out on Next Strain. If you have a little biology, a little understanding, maybe watch some videos on it. But yeah, that was that. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll get back into the news. Much more to cover. Stay tuned. Body bags everywhere. The numbers probably don't seem very real to you at your location. I'm out in the country. I haven't seen too many body bags out here, so you never know. Looks like you know, a bus station for the ambulances. This is happening somewhere in China or something. We could probably get a translation here, but I think this was China. You see some English here, so it's a little confusing. Singapore, there you go. That's why. See, there's a reason for everything. And what else we got? Cooking the books, they say. Remarkable. Dr. Burke says here very plainly that anyone who dies with COVID-19 is being counted as having died with COVID-19. But this wasn't always the case. We'll have to listen to this here.
Country, we've taken.
And one for Dr. Fauci or Dr. Burks. Can you talk about your concerns about deaths being misreported by coronavirus because of either lack of testing or standards for how they're characterized?
So I think in this country, we've taken a very liberal approach to mortality. And I think the reporting here has been pretty straightforward over the last 5 to 6 weeks. Prior to that, when there wasn't testing in January and February, that's a very different situation and unknown. There are other countries that if you had a pre-existing condition, and let's say the virus caused you to go to the ICU and then have a heart or kidney problem, some countries are recording that as a heart issue or a kidney issue and not a COVID-19 death.
And we're learning that 1 in 5 cases end up in a heart attack, and probably about as many with acute kidney failure, which is lethal as well. And we're learning that this is very much happening in America in terms of classifications. The numbers are undercounted. But, you know, once again, don't be concerned because everything is under control. I mean, that's the sense that you're getting right now, right? Like, it's getting better. And we want to be at the end of the tunnel, right? We want to get there eventually. And that's why it's important to look at videos like this and understand that everything is under control. And, you know, with a few more trenches like this, you know, everything will be contained. Ladies and gentlemen. And right now, of course, the numbers are pretty much like a 9/11 every day. It'll probably get a little worse than this. And then, you know, hopefully that'll be the end of the first wave. Will it be the end of the first wave? Will there be another wave? What will that look like? Usually major epidemics, pandemics, if you will, come in 3 waves. And so you can almost, count on another wave. But of course, previous epidemics, pandemics have been just regular viruses. They weren't like modern day bioweapons, where it's like, the worst of the worst mixed together. HIV, SARS, perhaps herpes. And why not a little rabies as well? I think we're getting some of that. But anyways, what's this? Oh, this is the World Death Organization. Let's listen in to this one.
Members, presumably by force.
In most parts of the world, due to lockdown, most of the transmission that's actually happening in many countries now is happening in the household, at family level. In some senses, transmission has been taken off the streets and pushed back into family units. Now we need to go and look in families to find those people who may be sick and remove them and isolate them in a safe and dignified.
We need to find them. We need to go door to door, bitches. That's what they're saying. Let's see. This looks like the famous hydroxychloroquine professor from France met with the French president. And I don't know, he must be using the disinfectant. He's got the mask, very nice mask. And, that's becoming the new policy. It wasn't long ago that they were telling you don't need a mask for this airborne bioweapon. But now they're all wearing masks, and they're like, you should wear masks too. And so, there's 2 types of people out there. There's the people that watch, regular TV, and then there's the people that watch this show. And the people that have been watching this show, I mean, they're not too surprised. But, imagine what the people watching TV must be thinking. They're like, whoa, all this time they're like, we don't need a mask, but now we need a mask. That's a bummer, dude. That's a fucking bummer, because I've been going everywhere without a mask thinking like, I just got to wash my hands and I'll be fine. Now they're telling us it's like some kind of super virus that spreads in the air. It's airborne. Anyways, let's not dwell on the past, shall we? Coronavirus patients in South Korea are now testing positive for a second time. We've talked about this, but there's more and more reports of this. You'll be seeing more and more reports of that. And let's see, what's the counter at right now? Shall we see? I have a feeling that we're going to get blasted here, but we may not get an accurate picture. 1.59 million cases, nearly 100,000 deaths worldwide, ladies and gentlemen. And the numbers just keep going up. Okay, so that just reset the whole thing because there are a bunch of bitches out there. They try to put on a live show, and it's nothing but sabotage. So yeah, we got numerous angles of this mass gravesite. They're using convicts, right, to basically dig mass graves. And, again, these are about 3 or 4 coffins high, 2 rows. So, we're talking, perhaps, 1,000, 2,000 people in a trench. It's very nice. I think we got more footage of this. And this guy gives a pretty interesting narrative on the situation. Not sure if we're going to be able to actually cruise.
I had to do a little...
No, not going to be able to cruise through this, but they go through the trenches as well. Moving on with the news. Major meat processors shutting down plants as employees get sick. And I think this is going to become more and more common as the supply chains begin to buckle. Will they rebound during the summer? I think there's a decent chance of that we'll still have enough, mojo, if you will, to fight it out through the summer and, get one last harvest in and all that stuff. I think, this summer is going to be an excellent opportunity to, improve your position now that you've seen, the virus hit America, now that you've gotten your first taste of it. With summer, coming around, don't just waste it doing what you normally do. Do a little bit of that. Go to the lake, go tubing or whatever. But definitely prepare for the new world and the second wave. We're going to get a full winter of this. And that's when the real damage is going to come. What we're piecing together right now is that, obviously nobody's immune to this virus with the first infection, and nearly everybody's going to get it. The death rate is certainly between 5 and 20%. Worldometer has it 20% of resolved cases, and most countries right now are somewhere at 5%, but with a ton more, numbers missing. So if 5% of America gets it, well, if 5% of America dies from it, that's, many millions of people. And probably like 15, 20 million people. So, that's just one country. This could end up wiping out, by this time next year, 50 million, 100 million people, just like the Spanish flu. You never know. Be on the lookout for Wi-Fi 6, ladies and gentlemen. The in-home 5G. Blow to Britain's hopes for coronavirus antibody testing as study finds a third of recovered patients have barely detectable evidence that they had the virus already. This was actually a real bombshell news report. Certainly isn't going to get its fair share of views, but if you read this article, it tells you that the reason that their tests are failing is because, in 1 out of 3 people, they hardly have any antibodies for this virus after being infected, and they know they were infected because they had tested positive with the PCR test. And so, they'd gone through the whole thing and recovered, and then now they're giving them an antibody test to see if, they still have the antibodies, if they can use this to let people go to work. And what they're figuring out is that 1 out of 3 people don't even have antibodies for this virus, which means 1 out of 3 people easy is going to get reinfected with this virus like they never had it the first time. And it goes into, quite a little detail as far as, who on average was not making antibodies, which was young people. And the older people were making tons of antibodies, way too much. And that was leading to the cytokine storm. But essentially we're seeing, a very interesting characteristic here. And we'll have to see, what else we find in this regard. But now that these types of news stories are making the headlines, more and more researchers will be looking into this, and more reporters will be looking for, research papers like this. And I think we'll get, more information as far as, what the actual pathogenesis is, what this disease actually is. But we've gotten quite a bit of, anecdotal reports saying that, either people are getting reinfected or they're relapsing, like herpes. And so we'll just have to see, what actually ends up being the norm for this disease, for this syndrome. Let's see. A sailor assigned to the Theodore Roosevelt was found unconscious and is now in intensive care. We hope that this guy is going to pull through with this girl. But these ships are not made for a sustained infection from a bioweapon. You know, it's one thing if like a gas cloud rolls through there, right? Kind of like when they went to Fukushima, you know, they had ships, you know, just outside of the harbor of Fukushima when it blew, basically, or after it blew, you know, just kind of like downwind. And look, I mean, they got exposed and they didn't really find out until years later. So it didn't really affect their job, you know, right then and there. It didn't affect their combat readiness. You can go through a Fukushima cloud and still, you know, nuke the Chinese. But when the whole crew basically, you know, gets sick and then, you know, the ship has to, you know, basically get disinfected at harbor, you know, that's a game changer. So we've already got 2 carriers, you know, out of commission, basically. What's next? And, you know, that's just, you know, a real simple way of looking at it. Of course, you know, we're going to want to blame someone for this. But truth be told, you know, the Chinese booted this virus up and the New World Order let this thing in so that, you know, each puppet could be a wartime president and suspend, you know, constitutional rights. And now we're all prisoners locked down, you know, wondering what's going to happen next. And they don't want to, you know, they don't want to let it go. They don't want to, you know, reduce the restrictions. And I'm sure there's, you know, you can have a healthy debate about it. But if they were going to lock down everybody, they should have locked down everybody in January, February to prevent the mass spread. Now that everybody's pretty much been exposed to it, and that summer is coming here, you know, you might as well let people just kind of work it out on their own. But you can imagine that, you know, there's a lot of arguments to be made about staying at home and all that. But from what we know about this virus, and I think our ideas are, you know, much more advanced than most people's, our recommendation is that people need fresh air, they need exercise, they need sunshine, they don't need to be breathing in indoor pollution and, you know, infected air. And you'll notice that you know, there's a lot of horrible stories of entire households being wiped out because of community virus load. And so, you know, people need to air out, they need to go outside and get away from anybody and everybody for a while until people can bring down their virus load. You know, and that's just one of the things. That's just one of the things to look at when it comes to disease management. Again, we've listed quite a few recommendations in the video description on our ScrewTube channel. So I'll be sure to look at that and take those recommendations seriously, especially if you're feeling the effects. Magnesium will bring your energy back. Selenium, spirulina, and zinc will act as natural antivirals. And it's all about bringing down the virus load in your body, in your house, in your community, etc., etc. Let's see. U.S. cases here. Well, we're just exploding. You know, the numbers are just exploding. But again, they're capped at how many people they can test. And we don't think they're testing anybody. We don't know where these numbers are coming from. But chances are everybody's been infected. This is a bioweapon that was made to infect an entire country before the first cases made it to the hospital. And you know, we'll see what that actually means here pretty soon. There were an average of so this is a very interesting article as well. From March 30th to April 5th, 2019, there was an average of 69 calls a day for cardiac arrest and 26 deaths, 38% of the calls. From that same time period in 2020, so March 30th to April 5th, the week that ended last Sunday. There was an average of 284 cardiac calls with 200 deaths a day. 72% of the calls ended up in death. So these are the statistics from New York City. And you can imagine that all of these deaths, the 200 a day, the heart attacks, the majority of them were actually COVID. And, that adds up. How long has this been going on if they just kind of like bury, 200 a day, because of this, another 200 a day because of that, another 200 a day because of this. It looks legit on the death certificate. Nobody's going to question it, but it's an extra, it could be an extra 500,000 people a day that they're hiding out there at Hart Island. Who are these people? And undoubtedly, these are, people from the outer boroughs. All right, people from Manhattan would, get the body delivered right away. But in the outer boroughs, you end up on Hart Island. But everything's under control, ladies and gentlemen. No need to worry. And I think that probably brings us back to yesterday's bombshell report, where we could see, the intelligence community warning about the crisis as early as November. And this kind of fits in perfectly with the timeline that we were imagining. And see how it just kind of like all clicked? Now, what did we say? It was brilliant, right? And I don't want to sound like an asshole, but, it's going to sound that way a little bit. But it was really brilliant. We know that we're up against cult members. Anybody that's been following, the news, the WikiLeaks and the Podesta files, the creepy Biden, we're up against, creepers, cult members, Luciferians, the Anton LaVey, Aleister Crowley, Madame Blavatsky, the whole works, right? And we're thinking to ourselves, well, these creepers, if they're going to do something like this, it's going to be somewhere around Halloween, right around there, we're thinking. And even though at the time, which was early on in the investigation, they were like, oh, the first case was, early December, and that guy got infected at the seafood market sometime mid-November, November 17th, they thought. And when we saw that, we're like, you know what, it's probably earlier than that. It's probably Halloween. And then we started learning about, Event 201 happening in October 2019. We started learning about Crimson Contagion, which happened in October 2019. And the Wuhan military games, which were like from the 18th of October to the 27th or something like that, just before Halloween. And we're like, oh, that's starting to look, more like what we would expect from these cult members. And now we're learning that by November, it was a full-blown epidemic already. It wasn't just a few cases, it was a ton of cases. And for there to be a ton of cases in November, that means it must have been released, probably late October. And so I think, the timeline is starting to fit in. And, with any crime, it's always who benefits, what's the motive, The motive is the crime is the motive. That's pretty much criminal justice 101. And that, these imperial masters, this New World Order, basically wants to rule like a dictatorship. And how do they do that? Medical martial law. So it all really fits in, quite perfectly. And this is just another 9/11. And so, these people, basically unleash the super virus, and then they're like, you must stay home, and, we basically have imprisoned you all and have suspended your rights. I don't think this is what we elected them for. Just saying. I don't think we elected them to do this kind of stuff, right? They're supposed to be public servants, not, public enslavers, but it's literally an occupation out there. It's not freedom. It's an occupation. We'll have to leave it there for this broadcast. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Until the next time, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, you are the resistance.